They're getting smaller and smaller.
They're getting smaller.
Right?
I mean, people do respect you more when you have a big camera for some reason.
No, it's cool. And about 20 guys that you pay a fortune to, right?
All right. Okay. You said that you love winning, and you have won a lot in life, in real estate, in business, in TV, in politics. So let me start with a mindset, a psychology question. What drives you more, the love of winning or the hate of losing?
Maybe equally, maybe both. I don't like losing, and I do like winning. I've never thought of it as to which is more of a driving force.
You've been close with a lot of the greats in sport. You think about Tiger Woods, Muhammad Ali. You have people like Michael Jordan, who I think hate losing more than anybody. So what do you learn from those guys?
Well, they do have something different. You know, the great champions have something very different, like the sports champions. And, you know, you have champions in other fields, but you see it more readily in sports. You see it over a weekend, or you see it during a game. And you see that certain people stand out, and they keep standing out. But it's there for you. It doesn't take a lifetime to find out that somebody was a winner or a loser. And so the sports thing is very interesting, but, you know, I play golf with different people, and there's a different mindset among champions. There's really a very different mindset. There's a different thought process. You know, talent-wise, sometimes you can't tell the difference in talent, but at the end of a weekend, they seem to win. And it's very interesting. Like, as an example, Tiger or Jack Nicklaus, he was a phenomenal winner. And he does have a different way about him. And Tiger has a different way about him. And Michael Jordan. And there's never one, you would think that there'd be one way. Arnold Palmer was the nicest guy you'd ever meet. And then you have some champions that aren't really nice. They're just focused on doing their job. So you have, you know, there's not one type of person. But the one thing I would say that everybody seems to have in common is they're very driven. They're driven like beyond.
They don't seem to give up easily.
They don't give up. They don't give up, but they do seem to be, you know, they have a passion that's maybe more than people that don't do as well.
You've said that politics is a dirty game in the past.
It is a dirty game. It's certainly true.
So if it is a game, how do you win at that game?
Well, you win at that game by getting the word out, and by using sense. You have to have a feeling where it's going. You also have to have a feeling of what's right. You can't necessarily just go what's popular. You have to do what's good for a country if you're talking about countries. But you have to get the word out, and you have to just continuously, like, for instance, you have a great show. You have a great podcast. It's very well watched. And I'm sitting here and I do this. A lot of people see it. And I do other things, and a lot of people see that. And I go traditional also. You know, you have traditional television, which is getting a little bit older and maybe less significant, could be less significant. I don't know, but it's changing a lot. The whole plane of platform is changing a lot. It's changed a lot in the last 2-3 years. But from a political standpoint, you have to find out what people are doing, what they're watching, and you have to get it. You have to get on. I just see that these platforms are starting to dominate. They're getting very big numbers. I did Spaces with Elon, and they got numbers like nobody's ever heard before. So, you know, this is, you wouldn't do that on like radio. You wouldn't do those numbers, no matter how good a show. You wouldn't do those numbers on radio. You wouldn't do them on television.
You've been successful in business. You've been successful in politics. What do you think is the difference between gaining success between the two different, disparate worlds?
Yeah, and they're different, very different. I have a lot of people that are in business that are successful, and they'd like to go over to politics. And then you realize they can't speak. They choke. it's hard to make a speech in front of that. Let's say you're talking about a big audience, but I get very big audiences. And, for many people, it's virtually impossible to get up and speak for an hour and a half and have nobody leave. It's not an easy thing to do. And it's an ability. But I have many people that are very, very successful in business would love to do what I did. And yet they can't pull the trigger. And in many cases, I don't think it would work. Almost for everybody, it's not going to work. It's a very tough thing to do. It's a big transition. And now, if you talked about people in the business and politics going into business, likewise, that wouldn't generally work out so well either. It's different talents. It's different skills. I have somebody who wants to go into politics so bad, but he's got a little problem. He's got stage fright. Now, he's a total killer, but if he gets up into a stage in front of people, he doesn't do well, to put it mildly, actually. I mean, he does badly.
So you have to be able to make hard decisions like you do in business, but also be able to captivate an audience.
Look, if you're a politician, you have to be able to speak in front of large crowds. There are a lot of people who can't do that. I've seen it. They can't even think about doing it, and they don't. There are many people in business right now, I could name them, but I don't want to embarrass anybody. They've been talking about running for president for 15 years. And they're very big in business, very well known, actually. But it takes guts to run. Like for president, I can tell you it takes guts to run. It's also a very dangerous profession, if you want to know the truth, but dangerous in a different sense, too. But it takes a lot of courage to run for president. It's not easy, but you have, and the same people as I do, there are a lot of people that would like to run for president that are very, very successful in business, but they don't have the guts to do it. And they have to give up a lot.
One of the great things about people from the business world is they're often great deal makers. And you're a great deal maker. And you've talked about the war in Ukraine and that you would be able to find a deal that both Putin and Zelensky would accept. What do you think that deal looks like?
I think the deal, and I wouldn't talk about it too much because I think I can make a deal. If I win as president-elect, I'll have a deal made, guaranteed. That's a war that shouldn't have happened. It's terrible. Look, Biden is the worst president in the history of our country, and she's probably worse than him. That's something that should have never happened, but it did happen. And now it's a much tougher deal to make than it would have been before it started. Millions of people. I think the number is going to be a lot higher when you see this all at some point iron out. I think the death numbers are going to be a lot higher than people think. When you take a look at the destruction and the buildings coming down all over the place in Ukraine, I think those numbers are going to be a lot higher. They lie about the numbers. They try and keep them low. They knock down a building that's 2 blocks long. These are big buildings. And they say one person was mildly injured. No. A lot of people were killed. And there are people in those buildings, and they have no chance. Once they start coming down, there's no chance. So that's a war that absolutely has to get done. And then you have Israel, and then you have a lot of other places that are talking war. The world is a rough place right now. And a lot of it's because of the fact that America has no leadership. And I believe that she'll be probably worse than Biden. I watched the interview the other night. I mean, it was just a softball interview.
So you would like to see her do more interviews, challenged more?
I don't know. I can't believe the whole thing is happening. We had a man in there that should have never been in there. They kept him in a basement. They used COVID. They cheated, but they used COVID to cheat. They cheated without COVID too. But you had somebody in there, and now we have a woman that is not, she couldn't do an interview. This was a really soft interview. This is an interview where they're giving her multiple choice questions, multiple guess. I call it multiple guess. And I don't think she did well. I think she did very poorly.
How do you think you'll do in the debate coming up? It's in a few days.
So I've done a lot of debating, only as a politician. I never debated. My first debate was the Rosie O'Donnell debate, right? The famous Rosie O'Donnell debate, the answer. But I've done well with debates. I mean, I became president. Then the second time I got millions more votes than I got the first time. So I was told if I got 63 million, which is what I got the first time, you would win. You can't not win. And I got millions of more votes than that and lost by a whisker. And look what happened to the world with all of the wars and all of the problems. And look what happened with inflation, because inflation's just eating up our country, eating it up. So it's too bad. But there are a lot of things that could happen. We have to get those wars settled. We have to get, I'll tell you, you have to get Ukraine done. That could end up in a third world war. So could the Middle East. So could the Middle East.
So maybe let's talk about what it takes to negotiate with somebody like Putin or Zelensky. Do you think Putin would be willing to give up any of the regions they already captured?
I don't know. I can tell you that all of this would have never happened, and it would have been very easy because you don't have, like, that question wouldn't be asked. That's a tougher question. Once that starts happening, because he has taken over a lot of territory. Now, I guess they're insurgents now too, right? So, it's a little bit interesting that that's happening and that it can happen. And it's interesting that Putin has allowed that to happen. Look, that's one that should have never started. We have to get it stopped. Ukraine is being demolished. They're destroying a great culture that's largely destroyed.
What do you think works better in those kinds of negotiations? Leverage of, let's say, friendship, the carrot or the stick? Friendship or sort of the threat of using the economic and military power?
So it depends on who the person is. Everyone's different. Negotiation's interesting because it depends on who the person is. And then you have to guess or know through certain knowledge which is, more important, the carrot or the stick. And with some people it's the stick, and with some people it's the carrot. I think the stick probably is generally more successful in that, we're talking about war. But the kind of destruction that we're witnessing now, nobody's ever seen. I mean, it's a terrible thing. And we're witnessing it all over. We're witnessing it in all parts of the world. And a lot of things are going to get started. Look what's going on with China. Look at Japan. They're starting to rearm now. They're starting to rearm because China's getting, taking over certain islands. And there's a lot of danger in the war right now in the world. There's a great possibility of World War III. And we better get this thing done fast, because 5 months with people like her and him, he's checked out. He just goes to the beach and thinks he looks good in a bathing suit, which he doesn't. He's sort of checked out. Hey, look, you can't blame him. That was a coup. They took it over. They took over the presidential deal. The whole presidential thing was taken over in a coup. He had 14 million votes. She had no votes, not one. And nobody thought it was going to be her. Nobody wanted it to be her. She was a joke until 6 weeks ago when they said we're going to have to, politically, they felt they had to pick her. And if they didn't pick her, they thought there'd be a problem. I don't know if that's right or not. I actually don't think it's right, but, they thought it was right. And now immediately the press comes to their aid.
If we can go back to China on negotiation, how do we avoid war with China in the 21st century?
Well, there are ways. Now, here's the problem. If I tell you how, and I'd love to do it, but if I give you a plan, like I have a very exacting plan how to stop Ukraine and Russia, and I have a certain idea, maybe not a plan, but an idea for China, because we're in a lot of trouble. They'll be in a lot of trouble too. but we're in a lot of trouble. But I can't give you those plans because if I give you those plans, I'm not going to be able to use them. They'll be very unsuccessful. Part of it's surprise, right?
Right.
But they won't be able to help us much.
So you have a plan of what to say to Putin
Yeah, I
when
know.
you take
exactly.
office.
No, I had a very good relationship with him, and I had a good relationship with Zelensky too, but I had a very good relationship with Putin.
Tough topic, but important. You said lost by a whisker. I'm an independent. I have a lot of friends who are independent, many of whom like your policies, like the fact that you're a deal maker, like the fact that you can end wars, but they are troubled by what happened in the 2020 election and statements about widespread fraud and this kind of stuff, fake election scheme. What can you say to those independent voters to help them decide who to vote for?
I think the fraud was on the other side. I think the election was a fraud, and many people felt it was that, and they wanted answers. And when you can't challenge an election, you have to be able to challenge it. Otherwise, it's going to get worse, not better. And there are lots of ways to solve this problem. Go to paper ballots, do it the easy way. I mean, the paper ballots, and you have voter ID, and you have same-day voting, and you have proof of citizenship, which is very important because we have people voting that are not citizens. They just came in, and they're loading up the payrolls. They're loading up everything. They're putting students in schools. They don't speak a word of English. And they're taking the seats of people that are citizens of our country. So, look, we have the worst border in the history of the world. We have coming into our country right now millions and millions of people at levels that nobody's ever seen. I don't believe any country's ever seen it. And they would use sticks and stones not to make it happen, not to let it happen. We don't do anything. And we have a person who was the border czar, who now said she wasn't really the border czar, but she was. She was the border czar, but she was in charge of the border. And we have her, and she's saying very strongly, "Oh, I did such a good job. She was horrible, horrible. The harm she's done." But we have people coming in from other countries all over the world, not just South America, and they're coming in from prisons and jails. They're coming in from mental institutions and insane asylums. And they're street criminals. Right off the street, they take them. And they're being given to our country. Drug dealers, human traffickers. We're destroying our country. This is a sin, what's been allowed to take place over the last 4 years. We're destroying our country. And we'll see how that all works out. But it's not even believable. And now you saw in Aurora, Colorado, a group of very tough young thugs from Venezuela taking over big areas, including buildings. They're taking over buildings. They have their big rifles, but they're taking over buildings. We're not going to let this happen. We're not going to let them destroy our country. And in those countries, crime is way down. They're taking them out of their prisons, which is good because good for them. I do the same thing. By the way, if I ran one of those countries, any country in the world, I would make sure that America has every one of our prisoners. Every one of our criminals would be here. I can't believe they're going so slowly, but some aren't. But they all are doing it. And we can't let that happen. They're emptying out their prisons and their mental institutions into the United States of America. We can't let that happen.
So a lot of people believe that there was some shady stuff that went on with the election, whether it's media bias or big tech, but still the claim of widespread fraud is the thing that bothers people.
Well, I don't focus on the past. I focus on the future. I mean, I talk about how bad the economy is, how bad inflation is, how bad things like, which is important. Afghanistan was, in my opinion, the most embarrassing thing that's ever happened to our country. And because of that, I think Putin went in. When he saw how stupid we were, Putin went in. but it was the most embarrassing moment in the history of our country. I really believe that. But, we left 13 dead soldiers. Think of it, 13 dead soldiers, many soldiers horrifically hurt with arms and legs and everything else gone. We left hostages behind. We left Americans behind. We left military equipment, the likes of which nobody's ever left behind before. Billions and billions of dollars of equipment. They're now selling the equipment. They're one of the largest arms dealers in the world. And very sad, very sad. And we were there for a long time. I was going to get out. We were getting ready to get out. Then we got interrupted by the election. But we would have been out with dignity and strength. We were having very little problem with the Taliban when I was there because they knew it was going to be tough. I dealt with Abdul. Abdul was the leader. And we got along fine. He understood. But, they were shooting. They were killing a lot of our people before I came down. And when I got there, I spoke to him. I said, can't do it. Don't do it anymore. We went 18 months before this happened. This horrible day happened. We went 18 months and nobody was shot at or killed.
What do you think that was, the carrot or the stick in that case in Afghanistan?
The stick, definitely.
So
the
stick. Threat of military force.
That was the stick, yeah. It doesn't have to be, but that was the stick.
Well, let me just linger on the election a little bit more. For this election, it might be a close one.